So thank you for joining today. My name is Michaela Hartle, a program assistant at CCEI. And today for Timely Topics, you're probably wondering what this Timely Topics is going to be about. And we are actually talking about a book that the CCEI team has been reading for a little while now. And that we are trying to connect and see how we can implement into what we do at the center, into our programs and our daily lives as well. So we have brought Brooke Gemmell, a design technologist at Greenhouse Studios, in today to talk a little bit about designing your life. So Brooke, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Michaela and Jen and the whole CCEI team for having me. I'm really excited about this. And to all of you for taking the time out of your day to come chat with me about life design. So I truly believe that this can help anyone carve a path that is happy and fulfilling, no matter who you are or where you are in this crazy journey that we call life. So first, I would just like to invite you all to just take a moment to slow down, look around you, and take in the qualities of the room that you're in right now. Just feel the weight of your feet on the ground or of your seat in your chair. Take a deep breath in, which I need to do a lot, and let it go. I find if you need to do another one, do it, because I'm always a 3 breaths sort of person. Just allow yourself to be here in the present, right where you are right now. So wherever it is that you find yourself today, whatever you're bringing with you, however you're feeling right now, just know that you are exactly where you need to be. So let me start with a true story about a UConn student that I had in my first year experience class last semester. Now, we're going to call her Spider Woman because I let my 3-year-old pick the mystery name for this story. So I'm questioning the sanity of that choice, but we're going to stick with it. So anyway, like very many first year students, Spider Woman had spent the last decade of her life answering this question: what do you want to be when you grow up? Now, eventually that question evolved into concrete decisions needing to be made. Things like picking the right college, the right major, and for the right career path. So by the time she was graduating high school at 17 years old, Spider Woman believed that she needed to know exactly what it was that she wanted to be, and that she needed to do everything exactly right to be able to achieve it. Fast forward to October 2023, having had just a bit of life design under her spider belt, Spider Woman and I had a meeting in which she mentioned that she was questioning her path. Those first 9 weeks of college had shown her that she might not actually want to be an accountant, but she felt that she had already laid way too much groundwork and hadn't planned ahead enough to be able to change her major. So when I asked her if she might want to consider taking some steps with me towards exploring a life that she might love more, she told me that she feared it was too late, which blew my mind. So imagine at 18 years old, feeling that it is too late to change your story for the rest of your life. To feel like there's only one right thing for you, maybe only one right path to get there, but that you're stuck on a different path that you've already committed to. And maybe that's a path you chose when you wanted different things out of life. Maybe that's a path you chose because of external pressures. Maybe that's a path that someone else even chose for you. And maybe some of you can imagine that feeling because it's actually a staggeringly common dysfunctional belief. And it's one that those of us in academia are especially familiar with dealing with students. But the good news is that dysfunctional beliefs can be broken. And there are tools that you can put in your spider tool belt that will give you the power to design a life that works for you. Now, my background is in visual design, and I eventually found my way into a career in design thinking. So for those of you not familiar with design thinking, I'll introduce you briefly. The Interaction Design Foundation defines design thinking as a nonlinear, iterative process that teams use to understand users, challenge assumptions, redefine problems, and create innovative solutions to prototype and test. A lot of keywords there. And it's most useful to tackle problems that are ill-defined or unknown. Now, I would die on any hill saying that life is the most ill-defined and unknown problem out there. Now, of course, there are many schools of thought with many methodologies for tackling big problems, and potentially a lot of overlap between the different processes that we use in each field. So in engineering thinking, we are largely focused on solving our way forward. In business thinking, we want to optimize our way forward. And in research thinking, we are always analyzing our way forward. The key with design thinking is that we are building our way forward. So as a designer, this means that we are working to gain empathy for our audiences, to better understand the problems that we're going to try to solve, and ultimately creating prototypes, which are basically rough drafts that model potential outcomes. As a visual designer, like me, this may look something like maybe a sketch of a web page before I go ahead and program the whole website. It's quick, it's easy to produce, it's testable, and it's able to be iterated upon. But as a life designer, how might I create a prototype of something so complicated, so nebulous, and something so profoundly important as a life? Well, 2 winters ago, I was fortunate enough to participate in Stanford University's Life Design Studio, which is just one version of a course that teaches the principles of life design, created by two thought leaders who have pioneered this into what is now becoming a major emerging field of teaching and coaching, which Michaela mentioned. Their names are Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, the big 2 names in life design. So I know, again, several of the CCI team members have been reading that first book, Design Your Life, which I very highly recommend to anyone who finds this interesting. It's a great quick read and it's super fun and very relevant always. So if you're familiar with them, you may have recognized my inspiration for the title of this talk. The very first thing when you enter the studio at Stanford, and you do read this in the book if you're like me and haven't actually gotten to go there, but there's a big sign right at the front and it says, "You are here." A major pillar of life design is that where you are right now, no matter where that is a wonderful place to be and the perfect place to begin. It's never too late and it's never too early. But what exactly is life design? So simply put, it's the intentional building of a life that you love. It's about taking control of your trajectory and actively designing experiences that will help you test the outcomes that you think you might desire. Life design requires you to become aware of the agency that you have over your own time, your energy, and your resources. And it gives you a scaffolding upon which to build a life that's fulfilling and meaningful and unique to you. So that sounds super easy, right? Let me tell you, my first introduction to life design had me tail spinning in a complete existential crisis, ready to curl up in a ball and cry, because this came to me at a time where I really and truly needed it. It required me to be brutally honest with myself over what I actually wanted most out of life. And that's where we start. After we do the work to recognize our own dysfunctional beliefs, the first step that we'll take is to get clear on what it is you want. So what are your values, your goals? What are your desires? And this requires deep introspection and reflection. It's a crucial step. I'd argue the most crucial step in life design. And for sure, it is harder for some people than it is for others. I've been doing this type of work for a while. I've been in therapy. I help other people do this. It does take real practice. You have to learn how to develop a growth mindset, how to make sense of the motivators in your life. And this is something that we have frameworks for in life design. So it helps you approach this if this isn't native to you. But it's essential that you continuously ask yourself over and over, what kind of life do you want to live? A lot of time, the answer I get to that is that people want to have a great job that makes a ton of money. But why? We need to go deeper than that. So what does money actually afford you aside from material things? What does a title earn you? What does status mean to you? What are the very core values and desires beneath that want? And a lot of the time it boils down to security, stability, and safety. So we spend time reframing our values and our desires until we get a little more real with ourselves and a little closer to what our core drivers are. But we also need to go broader than that. So sure, career is important, but if designed properly, a career should complement the life that you want to live, not just serve as a means to an end or even an obstacle in the way of what you really want. So in life design, we consider 8 interdependent areas of wellness, which do include occupational and financial wellness, but go far beyond just those 2. So we also consider our physical health, our intellectual health, emotional wellness, social wellness, spiritual health, and environmental health. Those last 2 are sometimes a little harder for people to grasp because they hear spiritual health and they think religion, and they hear environmental health and think climate change. And for sure, those can be part of those wellness dimensions. But in life design, we consider spiritual health to be anything that feeds your spirit. So for me, that's horseback riding and playing with my son. And environmental health targets the spaces that you immerse yourself in. So for example, are you happy in a city, or would you rather be a hermit in the woods? And a lot of people say they'd rather be a hermit in the woods. All of that comes out when we do exercises aimed at helping you explore all of those 8 areas of yourself and the ways in which those things may either complement each other or complicate each other. So once you have some clarity on what you want, and this feels like the right time to mention that what you want can and will change over time. Only then can we begin to figure out how to get there. So this involves setting goals, mapping out priorities, working to better understand the problems that might exist before us, and revisiting that ultra important concept in design thinking of creating prototypes. So as I said before, a prototype is basically a rough draft of a concept. It's the thing that lets us hold a model in our hands, look at it from all different angles, see what it feels like, and most importantly, iterate it into new versions to test it all over again. In life design, prototypes can take on a great deal of forms. So an internship is a prototype for an occupation. A day shadowing someone in a different field is a prototype for a career change. Some time spent vacationing on the Amalfi Coast can be justified as a prototype for a permanent change in zip code. The prototype itself largely depends upon what you're trying to test out and to which degree you're wanting to test it. But the key is that you must absolutely have to test it. So you must also work to define a network of support for something that we call radical collaboration. Now, this is all about testing pathways and outcomes with people who inspire you, who challenge you and support you. These can be mentors, coaches, friends, colleagues. I always encourage people to join communities and groups that have similar values and interests or shared goals. But no matter who you surround yourself with, the important thing is that you're bouncing ideas off of them openly and frequently, and ideally reciprocating the same type of support for them in turn. Now, in any design process, there are multiple phases that we move through, and we go through them, we move through, we test, we go back to the beginning. And it's really important that you're consulting and collaborating all along the way at every step. And finally, it's really important to be flexible and adaptable. As we all know very well these days, life is very unpredictable. Things don't always go according to plan. And you have to practice being in a growth mindset. You need to be willing to fail forward and to fail furiously. And this is not something that you just do once. You don't move on and forget about it. Ideally, you iterate upon this for your entire life. So we have a bunch of exercises that we go through at different areas based on what we want to do. And these become tools that you employ when you need them. When you reach inflection points or moments of transition, or just when you feel like you need some clarity. The idea is to let ourselves dream our biggest and purest dreams, and to not shut ourselves down by the constraints that we have, whether those are real or perceived. So again, we have exercises that we can engage with. We don't we won't be doing any of them today because they're not really very well suited to this, but I would love to share some of those with anyone who's interested. A lot of these exercises help us to evaluate our constraints. They help us scale our ideas, and they help us reframe the things in our lives that we struggle to see from other angles. As life designers, we get to grapple with the most complicated, but also the most exciting design thinking problem that there is. And the best part about it is that it's always different, it's always relevant, and it's always up to you to decide what the outcome will be. If this is something that you think you want to try to take on, I would encourage you to start with any of the books listed on the Design Your Life website, especially the one that Michaela held up. Consider registering for one of their workshops, or come and chat with me and make me a part of your radical collaboration crew. These are things that you can be doing for yourself continuously, but there's also people who do this for other people. And you don't have to make it a career, you don't have to make it a practice, but it's scalable to what you want it to be. And it can be helpful in addressing really any area of your life, anything that you want to isolate. This can be truly helpful in my opinion. So that's all I have. Thank you. I know there's time for questions and comments, and I really look forward to anything that you guys might have.
Thank you, Brooke. This would be a great time if you want to unmute yourself to ask a question, or if you're more comfortable typing your question in the chat. I'll give it a few minutes, and please feel free to ask Brooke anything about designing your life or any of the tips that she gave during her talk.
Brooke, do you have students and staff and faculty alike that come and meet with you, or?
So that's a good question. So I kind of deal with life design in two different prongs of my life. So one is in my role at Greenhouse Studios as a design technologist. We're very focused on design thinking, and a lot of that is project building based, but I also have a lot of student employees. And so we work life design into what we do there. But Greenhouse Studios also has a very flattened hierarchy. So while we have students, staff, and faculty, we don't look at it as students, staff, and faculty. It's students, staff, and faculty. So a lot of what I try to bring it to the table for everybody, but most concretely, it's done with students. The other prong is through education. So like right now, it's been the first year experience, though I think it's really particularly helpful for second year students and onward, who've had a little bit of time at UConn under their belts. But that is kind of in a more structured curriculum, running them through a full life design thinking course. So yeah, anything outside of that, like faculty and staff, I mean, I think it's very helpful, especially in, I don't know if you guys have seen Designing Your New Work Life, also by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, but that's what I'm reading right now. And I think like that in this, I say post-pandemic, but I never really know if we're through with it. I think in this day, like I think that thinking about how you want to redesign the way that you work is especially pertinent for faculty and staff.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then I did see one question in the chat. So Caitlin says, what are some of the methods to testing?
Okay, so I'm actually going to take a step before the testing so I can give you kind of an example of what to test. So my favorite exercise to do with the students especially is something that we call Odysseys. So the first one, and I think Isabel, we've had you do this, and Jen's done this as well in a different context, but so in our Odysseys, first we have a chart that is a 5-year plan essentially. And we ask students to map out, and again, I'm using a student example, we're asking them to map out what is the story that you are telling for the next 5 years of your life. So when someone says, what are you going to do after you graduate or for the rest of your college experience? We're asking them to actually write that down. And they're required that one track has to mention the next 5 years of their professional endeavors, whether that's the classes that they want to take, an internship that they want to have, the job that they want to get afterwards. The other track is required to be personal. So are there trips you want to take? Do you want to be living on your own? Are there any other big goals that you want to do? Do you want to climb a specific mountain? Do you want to run a 5K? None of those things I want to do. Though, Peter, I know you might, but not for me. And that's, again, very individual to people. They're also asked to kind of gauge at the bottom of that chart, how well equipped are you to do these things? Do you have the time? Do you have the resources? Is this exciting to you? The next, so they do that, they put that aside. Then the next odyssey is, if you couldn't do that thing, you had to do something completely different, what would that be? And they do the same thing. It's required to be like super different. The third odyssey, my favorite, is the no constraints odyssey, which is if you had no limits, time, not a factor, money's not a factor. And most importantly, I find for students, pressure from parents and faculty and your friends and yourself is not a factor. What would you do? Now, a lot of the time with students, I found a high percentage of our students were like, I would drop out and go do this thing instead. So of course we walk them back a little bit, but you find that it is radically different. So what we try to do from there is now before we test it, we try to say, how can we prototype a life that maybe meets somewhere in the middle? What pieces, of course you can't go from the story you tell what you're doing right now to that life you want to live. But how can we try to get there? How can we because you find that gauge of how exciting is this to you is off the charts on the no constraints odyssey, but often is a lot lower on the story you tell. And then there's things, the thing that I think I mentioned before about radical collaboration, we haven't talked too much yet right now about, that is a huge key to pouring through our odysseys, because what you're supposed to do is discuss it with people. So we invite our students to share that with each other. And one of the questions that we ask is, what did you notice about the other person while they were sharing? What made them light up? And a lot of the time, sometimes it is in the story they tell, but sometimes it's in the what would you do otherwise. Of course, it's going to be in the no constraints. But then we find there's light bulbs going off. People who are like, I hadn't really realized that I was interested in that, or I didn't realize I didn't have this. And of course, in that moment, I always tell them, I'm not going to come find you in 5 years and say, you said you were going to do this and that was wrong. It's meant to change. So it is a lot easier for them to start to think about, ooh, okay, I didn't think about this. So now I can go forward and try to incorporate that. So in terms of the thing that they actually test, again, 5 years ahead of life is huge. We try to isolate something. And again, for students, a lot of time it is definitely more professionally. The example from that class I like a lot is a student another one who wanted to be in finance and accounting. And he was like, I think I want to be a photographer. And we were like, well, you're on one track now. Maybe it's a little scary to completely change your major and jump in, especially I know as an art major to say, hey, I'm going to go get an art degree and live a life. That can be a little hard to say to your parents. But if you're sure of it, it's a lot easier. So rather than say, okay, I'm going to change my major next semester, change everything up, maybe what you can do instead is go join the photography club. Go talk to photography students. Go shadow a photographer for a day. Go on LinkedIn, find a photographer, talk to them. And you find, we had students who did that, and then all of a sudden they had a mentor, and they were changing their major, and they knew what that would look like, and they weren't waiting 4 years. So the methods kind of do depend on what you're testing, but a lot of the time with testing, it's actually just it's doing it, and it's being willing to say yes and to try it and to know that it may suck, but good thing to know that in a test, and not when you've now changed your entire life.
Awesome. Okay, looks like
Thank you, Caitlin.
we have time for one more quick question. If anyone does want to unmute or put a comment in the chat while we are waiting on that next question, I do want to let you know that we can connect you with Brooke. If you would like to reach out to her afterwards, maybe have a meeting with her, email with her, just send us a quick email, and then I can connect the two of you.
Yeah, and I would love for that. I love talking about this to anyone who will listen, so please do feel free to reach out.
Okay.
Thanks, Michaela. I'll put my name on that list. That sounds awesome.
Okay.
Thank you, Brooke. Honestly, that is some mind-blowing wisdom you just dropped in 15 minutes. I'm really sorry.
Oh, thank you.
I've been a coach for almost 10 years now and done a lot of this work, and like the wisdom of what you just described, that was like such a consolidated version of how to be a little bit more intentional in life and try and live more of the life that you want to. Anyway, I'm like super inspired. I really could not agree more with everything you're saying. And part of me is coming to, as I've worked with so many people on these kind of concepts, it can still be really hard. I often use the word experiment, like data collection and experimentation. And I just find what you're talking about it goes against so much of, not against, but like it's counterintuitive for most of us, of like, well, I just pick a path and I go with it, and either my life will be on some level of terrible to wonderful, I don't know, as opposed to like, let me keep chipping away and checking in with how things are going and clarifying based on what I've been through now, what do I want. It can just feel hard. And part of my point is, well, it's hard anyway, so it might as well be hard intentionally, but that doesn't just solve the problem for people. So I just wonder, so getting in touch with you, reading the book, checking out the website, I'm wondering like what other steps to just get started, because I hear you, I'm like, just start anywhere, do something, anything, talk to someone. Like, what else do you find helps lower the barrier, makes it easier if people aren't as lucky to wind up having you as their boss or colleague?
Yeah, I mean, really the biggest thing is talking to people like that I find, like having any conversation and practicing that open conversation skill, because that is hard for some people.
Yeah.
Like I know for me, like you said, like you kind of are following a path and you were happy with that path, and all of a sudden, like I found myself transitioning from a making designer to someone who is more of like a making mentor, and moving into this design thinking role. And I was like, wait, this is not the path I set for myself. But luckily this came at the right time. And what helped me the most was that I had already been talking to a lot of people about that. And that was really the first start for me, that made it a lot easier for me to be able to actually do these things for myself, even though it is hard. But I would say step one is recognizing that like it's going to be hard, and forming the willingness to do that. And honestly, there are so many exercises that you can do. There's so many things you can read, podcasts, like there really is a lot out there. But coming to the table with that intentionality and that awareness and that agency for yourself, like it almost doesn't matter which thing you do, because again, it's like, it's your life. You're not going to do it wrong. So just do it. I hope that kind of gets at where you're going, but yeah.
Me too. Yeah. I hope it helps. And like Glennon Doyle says, right, we can do hard things. So
yes. Okay. Yeah. That's the podcast I've been binging actually.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brooke. Michaela,
oh, thank you for coming.
It's been incredible.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Peter. And thank you so much, Brooke, for joining us today. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else took something away with them. You were extremely inspirational, and definitely let everyone know that you don't have to stay where you are. If you have different ideas, go after them, be ambitious. And I think we all need that. So thank you very much. And before we do close today, I do want to let you know that we have another Timely Topics coming up on April 10th. So passion, persistence, and recognizing the malleable world with Jeremy Bronin. So please stay tuned and join us when Jeremy Bronin comes on April 10th. Thank you, everyone.